Welcome. Welcome to the Movement Cafe for March. We are covering a general conference, and we are so glad to see everybody here. We do Movement Cafe, of course, one Wednesday every month, but we have a couple of special cafes since we're getting close to general conference. We had a special cafe earlier. With divestment, where we covered divestment specifically with Bill McKibben and William Morris and Steve Hucklesby. And we will have a special cafe, also more of a webinar with MFSA on April 4th. So welcome, and we're glad you're here. I also want to say good morning and good afternoon. We cross a number of time zones, so it's always nice to have folks join from different time zones and get to know each other that way. We do want to hear from you. So my name is Rashenda, and I live in Oregon. And I love it here. I live in Southern Oregon. If you know anything about Oregon, it's gigantic. So think about the southern western corner. So yeah, I'm part of the North Pacific Northwest Conference, but I live in Oregon, Idaho Conference. So I like to think of myself as part of the greater Northwest area. So I would love it if you would introduce yourself in the chat. Let us know where you're coming from, what your interest is in general conference, if you've seen the legislation coming down, if you have any specific questions. We have wonderful folks here who are going to hopefully be able to, if not answer the questions you have, get you started on finding those answers. And that's just kind of a wonderful way that we do this. So again, for those are here, welcome, and I'm just really glad you're here. I want to tell you a little bit more about the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement. And that movement, of course, is one of the hosts. Circle Faith Future also co-sponsors this cafe, but the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement is, my goodness, it hit the ground running, and the effort has really exploded. And I'm going to ask Pat Watkins to tell us a little bit more about the movement. And of course, Pat himself is, shall we say, just, oh my goodness, every part of the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement, and his work with Earth Keepers and his work as an Earth missionary, and just this wonderful human being. So I'm going to turn over Pat to tell us a little bit about the movement.
Thanks, Rashenda, and thanks for being here, everyone. So the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement is this, it's a relatively new organization within the church, and we see ourselves sort of as an umbrella organization. We're trying to hold together all these disparate pieces of creation care work going on throughout the connection. The good news is there's lots and lots of all those pieces out there. And so we feel like if we can kind of connect all of those pieces and network them together and hold them together, then we can be more effective as a group than doing our own thing in our silos everywhere. So we have boards and agencies of the church that are connected with us. We got boards and agencies doing some really cool things. We have annual conference teams now all over the country. So many of those, in fact, that we've begun to organize those on jurisdictional levels so that they can resource each other. Many of those annual conferences have district teams, and their local church teams, hundreds, if not thousands, of creation care teams in our local congregations. We have almost 400 Earth Keepers now. So we have all this cool stuff going on. And so the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement is an effort to try to hold all of that together and enable us to be as effective as we can be. We have several work teams. We have a worship team, a congregational solar team, wild church team, a green team, or a team that looks at green teams in local churches, state and federal policy advocacy team, a vocational team, fossil-free UMC is a part of us, a communications team, an annual conference organizing team, and a coordinating team that, again, is trying to hold all of that together. We're focused right now on lots of things, but primarily on General Conference, which is, of course, what the topic of this Movement Cafe is all about. So after we hear from our speakers, I'll come back and we can talk a bit about how we can be specifically involved in what's happening at General Conference. But that's kind of an overview of the creation justice movement. We love all of you, and we would love any and all of you to be a part of that movement. No problem. We're glad to have you. So thank you, Rashinda.
Oh, absolutely. Oh my gosh. The more the merrier. I found my people in this movement, there's no doubt. I want to just really quickly introduce our Movement Cafe team for this particular cafe. Oftentimes, Kathy and Dawn are our co-team members. We're all me and them co-team members together. Co-team members this time are me and Jonathan Brake and Kim Richmond. So if you need anything, go ahead and send them a chat. And I'm going to drop Jonathan's bio just so you get to know him a little bit in the chat. And of course, if you're an Earthkeeper, you already know Jonathan very well. And Kim will be presenting later, and so I will be dropping her bio in the chat a little bit later. But I am so glad. Like I say, this is a great place to be. So glad you're here. I want to introduce our first speaker today. Mitty Quinn is here, and she is a member of the Dunbarton United Methodist Church in Washington, D.C., and represents that church in the Baltimore, Washington Annual Conference. She's also a lay delegate to Jurisdictional Committee and on the steering committee of the Baltimore, Washington area Reconciling Methodists. She's also the co-convener of the Love Your Neighbor Coalition, and which is an organization that provides a venue for 15 social justice ministries and ethnic caucuses of the UMC to be in dialogue and coordinate and collaborate in their outreach in the world. So, boy, anybody who knows me knows that I just love these partnering collaborations. And so, Mitty, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Okay, thanks, Rashinda. We hope that my PowerPoint will share with you, in part because it helps me keep on track. I'm delighted to be with you today. As Rashinda said, I represent the Love Your Neighbor Coalition. Great. So just a few things that I want you to know about it. I'll go to the next slide, Rashinda. As Rashinda said, we're a group of 15 social justice organizations. And one of the most recent additions is Creation Justice Movement. We are thrilled to have them. Fossil Free was one of our original members about a decade ago when the Love Your Neighbor Coalition was started. Tampa was probably our first appearance. And since then we have grown to be 15. We've continued to meet during pandemic. We're one of the few places where this kind of unusual coalition meets to dialogue and share about grassroots ministries, but also some of the bigger issues that confront us as a United Methodist Church. Next slide. These are just the different logos of our organizations. You can find out about us at the Love Your Neighbor Coalition website, lyncoalition.org. Next slide, Rashinda. So what I wanted to tell you today is a little bit about what makes us a little different. And that's that in addition to our 15 organizations, we have 5 work groups that do the kind of all the nitty-gritty stuff. We have an advocacy and legislative group that works with each member organization to develop legislation that both at the annual conference level, but also general conference level. We have a team that will be monitoring the legislation that our member organizations have put forth to the 15 legislative committees that are active at General Conference. We have a witness team that monitors and kind of schedules all the different things that are going on for our individual organizations, but also plans more global or all unified witness. We'll be having a big international worship on April 21st, when the international delegates have arrived. And on the 28th, we're just having an old-fashioned North Carolina barbecue. Y'all come, and some music and just some fellowship, hopefully outside. Hospitality is part of that. We have a suite of rooms at the Hilton Garden and Hampton Inn right across the street from the convention center. We will have hosts there all the time for folks who maybe are a little burned out by what's going on at General Conference. And so we'll have some hospitality, some snacks, maybe even some bunny rabbits to pet, or a little chair massage. We try to have everything to make people feel comfortable and not stressed. Our global relations team is really the one that's quite unusual for some social justice. This has been in existence since we started, and we do home hosted dinners for our international delegates. We hire a team of translators who are available to have informal conversations outside the time of the plenary sessions. So we have Swahili, Portuguese, French translators who will be on hand to help facilitate those kind of relationship building things. This year, we're going to be hosting an international craft market in our hospitality suite at the Hilton Garden. And then we have a communications team that tries to collaborate all 15 of our organizations so that we keep our constituents apprised of what's going on. Next slide. So these are the 5, a little more elaborate about them, but everything that I've just told you: our advocacy and legislative, communications, global relations. The next slide, Rashinda. Witness, hospitality. I wanted to also mention volunteers, and that's because we are the group that coordinates volunteers for Reconciling Ministries Network, for Western Methodist Justice. We're supporting your Creation Justice folks in the special event you're having on April 22nd. So we have had anywhere from 75 to 300 volunteers show up at General Conference wanting to be of help in the witness and in the hospitality that goes on around General Conference, outside the building. And the next one. So these are just some highlights I wanted you to know. Rashinda has a handout that lists all of these, but these are some things that we're involved with this year. As I mentioned, the International Craft Market, the 3-language translating team. We also do intercultural communication training. We've had a series of them online. We'll probably have one more round for people who are from what we call colonizing nations, which would be, among others, the United States, but also those from colonized nations, which are often, for example, most of the countries in Africa have been colonized. It's a little different conversation that goes on, but we all need some help in understanding each other's cultures. So we will actually have those on hand in Charlotte. Every day there'll be an opportunity to participate in one of those in the morning from our training team. I mentioned the home hosted dinners. This year we have a little bit something special, which is an online gathering space hosted by the Young Prophets Collective. If any of you were in St. Louis, you may have heard the prophetic voice of a young man named J.J. Warren. J.J. has since become an ordained clergy and is now studying overseas, but he has created an online space for folks who identify as United Methodists, a safe space where they can go and be together and worship, but also they will be watching sessions of General Conference and having conversation and some safe time for folks there. We also have an on-site chaplains team with a 24/7 emergency call number. If people need someone to talk to, either emotional or spiritual support, they're on hand to help. And then I think the most obvious and the largest team that we have are morning and afternoon greeters. We're the smiling faces that meet the delegates as they come in the morning. In St. Louis, if you were there, we were the folks with the rainbow stoles and the rainbow scarves and the rainbow gloves. We sometimes have little scripture that we hand out, but always a greeting in as many languages as we can. The next slide is going to just show you some of the key events that I want you to be sure to be aware of. April 21st, we're having an international worship and love feast. We're collaborating with the National Federation of Asian American United Methodists, the National Association of Filipino United Methodists, and the United Methodist Africa Forum to put on just a wonderful worship and love feast at First United Methodist Church following it. Then, as you know, on April 22nd, we're celebrating Earth Day, and you have set up a wonderful guest speaker for us and for Creation Justice. That will also be at First United Methodist Church. We've partnered with a place called Seven. I know there's going to be a dinner, I believe, but for the masses that we hope will turn up for this, we've partnered with the 7th Street Market to provide some lower cost options before the 7 to 9 event at the church. Then on the 28th, I mentioned a good old-fashioned North Carolina barbecue with rice. Our international folks always ask that we have rice. It's a staple for them and it's sort of comfort food. So we'll have that. On May 4th, the day after everything closes, we'll have a sending forth and commissioning service. And then there are lots of events going on in between. I know that Creation Justice has created a prayer walk through the green. Our United Methodist for Kairos response will be and as people leave one day to share more information about what's going on in Palestine. And we have some individual groups that are doing things along the way as well. I think perhaps I've managed to do this in my time. Is there any more slides? I think the next one just says thank you for your time and for your attention. Oh, I did put this one in with your speaker. And then this one I wanted to share. So this is our t-shirt for this time. We've built on the theme that the bishops are talking about rebuild, rejuvenate. So we'll be the folks in the yellow t-shirts with the Lego blocks on it. So watch for us. And if you'd like one, these will be for sale on Bonfire. And I think the other ones are about our website. Please feel free. If you're planning to come, this is the website. But if you're planning to come to volunteer, we'd encourage you to sign up on the link website. Just add volunteer at the end, /volunteer, and you'll take you right to the place where you could sign up. We're just trying to keep track of folks and know who's there, and we can give you ideas about ways that you can help. So thanks very much. I think my 10-minute ringer has just gone off.
Thank you so much, Mitty. Fantastic. Really, really glad to see all of that. So, this is kind of like a lot of information all at once. This will be recorded, so you can go back and pause each one as you need. And the links that are going to be going in the chat are going to be really helpful. So, so wonderful. Thank you, Mitty, for all of that wonderful information. And I want to also, there may be some questions that come into the chat, Mitty, and if you want to just keep an eye on those, because everything moves quickly today, that might be helpful. So our next speaker is Neil Christie, and he is a United. Oh, did I?
Nope, I just said hi.
Okay. Okay, perfect. So yes, so Neil Christie is a United Methodist elder in the Greater New Jersey Conference and the Baltimore-Washington Conference and a Earthkeeper. Neil is the co-convener of the Love Your Neighbor Coalition, which brings together 15 national caucuses of the UMC. As we have heard, they're just doing wonderful things. He is a U.S. team member of the Christmas Covenant. And if you don't know about the Christmas Covenant, please Google that. And he serves on the board of the Native American International Caucus and is a member of the new Federation of Asian American in United Methodists. Neil serves as the executive director of Federation of Indian American Christmas Organizations of North America and working ecumenically on human rights in India. So I think you will find that many of us, all of us, those of us engaged in the work, and if you're engaged in the work, probably notice you have a lot of things that you get involved with because the layers, the overlap, everything interconnects and intertwines. And Neil is a wonderful example of how interconnected we can be and all the good things that come of it. So Neil, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thanks, Rashenda. And I'm going to do a screen share, friends. I'm going to ask, keep me on time. I have 12 minutes. I'm going to do 6 minutes and 6 minutes if we can do this. Okay. So what I'd like to do is spend this is really top level. Okay. We're talking about two different pieces of legislation, major pieces of legislation that will be found in numerous legislative committees at the General Conference. The first has to do with worldwide regionalization. What General Conference, and this we're hoping will be the priority, that General Conference will recognize that for us to move forward as a denomination, as a worldwide denomination, we absolutely must we must agree on legislation that that affirms what a worldwide regional and United Methodist Church will look like. Number one. Number two, put into place the potential changes in the Constitution that would then be ratified by annual conferences following the General Conference. So I just want to very briefly talk about what do we mean by worldwide regionalization. If you've already seen this presentation or if you've read the Christmas Covenant legislation, look at this through the lens of creation care, creation justice. Look at it through the lens of advocacy for all parts of creation. Think of it through specifically what it means for fossil-free UMC. So how does regionalization fit the priorities that you have today? So the mission of the United Methodist Church, I won't read this, but just a reminder that that is our mission. This is what the United Methodist Church looks like. If we were to map it out, these are already the regions of the United Methodist Church. The challenge is we don't behave like regions. The United Methodist Church outside the United States, for the most part, is able to organize itself as regions. The United States is not. Okay, this shows you a little bit of the numbers, the population of United Methodist. The numbers are now shifting. Northern Europe and Eurasia numbers will be shifting following General Conference with their decision to disaffiliate from the United Methodist Church. Many parts of Northern Europe and Eurasia, not all, but many parts of Eurasia. And then you'll see the jurisdictions on the left in the US, and those numbers, of course, are shifting with changes by our conferences and allowing for churches to leave. This gives you a sense of the number of delegates to General Conference. They're slightly off, but it's about this, if I'm not mistaken, it is about that many, just over that many, in 800. I love this quote, and I come back to it as a guiding principle for me. It sort of is a guiding light by my friend Mande Miombo, Bishop Mande Miombo. No region can claim to be the center and others the periphery. Our Lord Jesus Christ remains the center of God's mission. So if we can live into that, that's really the challenge. So the regionalization legislation, some people are going to say, well, this is going to add another layer of bureaucracy onto the church. Our argument is no, this will simplify our structure. Majority of what is discussed then by the United Methodist Church at General Conference will only be international issues that impact us all. Each region will be able to spend time on mission and ministry that's contextual. It'll actually hold us together. We are not calling for a change in our structure with our bishops or judicial council, our universities. We collectively support our mission. We're not looking at changing our social principles and making them regional. This is really holding the church together, keeping the structure together. Racial ethnic caucuses frequently have said, how will this impact us? Our hope is that racial ethnic caucuses in the United States will have a greater platform at a national level to lift up the issues that are priority for them. Central conferences will be able to lift up priorities for them with regionalization as well. What does this look like concretely? Lay ministry would be regionalized, criteria for admission of members, organizational structure, our hymns, our rituals, some of our judicial administration. Criterion for ordination standards would be contextual. This gives you a sense of where our original Christmas Covenant team members have come from. You see the diversity globally. And our priority has been this, and it's reflected in the worldwide regionalization legislation. Sustain the United Methodist connectional system. Decolonize the church so the U.S. is no longer perceived as the center, and decisions are not made by the U.S. as a center with missional outposts globally. Create greater equity in structure. And strengthen our connectional ministry. This is an opportunity to strengthen how we are a United Methodist Church together. These are our guiding principles. Ubuntu, I am because you are, the African sense of recognition and affirmation based on mutual relationship. European affirmation of the Imago Dei, that we are all made in God's image. We are all children of God. The Filipino value of bayanihan, that we come together communally to actually save people's homes, which is what happens in a typhoon in the Philippines frequently. We come to one another's mutual assistance. So these have been our guiding principles. Whatever legislation is passed, our Christmas Covenant team is testing it against those principles. Okay, I'm just going to scan through all of these. These are the endorsements we've received by conference, by caucus. The United Methodist Africa Forum has endorsed the Christmas Covenant and regionalization. The Love Your Neighbor Coalition, these are the constitutive members of Link that have endorsed regionalization. Again, we'd be maintaining our general church structure, current structure for electing our bishops, affirming a new revised social principles, which I'll get to in just a few minutes. We continue to affirm what's central to us as United Methodists, our article of the religion, our doctrinal standards, ministry of all Christians. These things are all maintained. These are the things that make us United Methodists and then give us the strength to be in contextual ministry. This is some more additional endorsements. We are working closely with the Standing Committee on Central Conference Matters, which represents the priorities outside the United States and the central conferences. So we are working collaboratively. I'm not going to go through the history here. Let's just go through this. Those of you who are interested in wondering why regionalization matters right now, there's a history to this. And I won't go into the detail, but this has been an issue that we've been dealing with since for more than 100 years, friends. This has been an issue we've been dealing with before we became the United Methodist Church and the various iterations of the Methodist ecclesiology and Methodist movement. And so this is really taking the next step. Back in the 1990s, Bishop Knockfield from the Philippines was raising this. 1939, this was raised as central conferences were created outside the United States, as from missional conferences to central conferences. So this is not a new conversation. This is not a new conversation. We are now, though, at a point where it is time. It is time to pass this legislation. Again, we are in great agreement with the Standing Committee and the Connectional Table. We want to decenter the U.S. in terms of our mission and ministry, maintain unity in the church, offer agency and power decision making to increase it really by region and still hold ourselves together. These are some of the petitions. If you look at the ADCA that we have, our legislation is located in. Much of it is enabling legislation. Most of it, with the exception of one section, which calls for constitutional changes, can be passed at General Conference by either a majority vote or a 2/3 vote. All right, I'm just going to skip through all this and skip through this. All right. If you're interested in seeing how the two main petitions compare to each other, I'm happy to send you this PowerPoint. You can compare what the Christmas Covenant has articulated, what the Standing Committee has articulated, and then there's a third set of legislation that really marries the two and then really addresses, okay, how do we enable this? What's the constitutional changes that really need to happen to enable it? The third piece of legislation I signed on to with my colleague Betty Kazadi from the North Katanga Episcopal area, excuse me, but I'm happy to send you all that. Overall, friends, it's important for us to know revised social principles would pass. Maintaining our doctrinal standards, strengthening our values, not restructuring what's needed. Okay, let me stop with this and move to the social principles. After General Conference passes regionalization, we still have a hurdle, and the hurdle is our annual conferences. Our annual conferences will need to pass by a 2/3 aggregate vote. What that means is those who are members of annual conference need to show up, and we need as many votes as possible voting in favor of the enabling legislation, which is really making some constitutional changes. That's going to be our next hurdle. We feel very confident that regionalization will pass at General Conference, but our work will not be done. From May forward, we're going to be working with annual conferences to make the constitutional changes that are necessary. For talking points, I would call your attention to this set of talking points that the Connectional Table is prepared. They're more general. If you're interested in the table, if you're interested in, then I can send that to you. If you're interested in the videos of endorsements. Those links are all there for you as well. I'm going to stop screen sharing and go right to the revised social principle. Excuse me, I didn't mean to stop screen sharing entirely. I'm just going to go through the social principles very quickly here. Those of you that have been tracking this know that the United Methodist social principles have not been revised in over 50 years. They have every general conference, there's a change to the social principles. The social creed, there are only 2 general conferences that made some changes, but every general conference, there's a change to the social principles reflecting the realities of the day. When it comes to creation care, creation justice, you see where the real changes have happened, honestly, and they've happened really in the past 12 years. That's where the significant changes have happened. In the revised social principles, you will see significant changes, and I'm happy to talk about that in the breakout time. But it's important for you to know the process and how we came to revise the social principles here. And if I can just go to my next slides. We want to affirm that the social principles continue to be a Wesleyan commitment to speak to the traditions of our day. This begins in 1908 with our social creed. Some of you are familiar with this. The majority of the language in the original social creed had to do with labor. Frequently, though, we disembody labor as if it's not, there's no impact on an extraction economy and what it does to our ecology, what it does to the earth and the air and the water. So if we can imagine our creed and our social principles against through the lens of creation, I think that is the challenge as we work to pass this. This is the 2016 social creed. This has not been changed since it was written in 1972. The companion litany to the social creed reflects more of an appreciation for creation and creation care, I think, than our current social creed. The companion litany was written through a regional process, 2004 to 2008. Again, this is just to reflect, again, this has been a 12-year journey. It's been a 12-year journey, a deeply United Methodist journey. You see the number of United Methodists again. If I can click on here and make it a little better. It began with a first draft, excuse me, it began with listening sessions globally. We had listening sessions from around the world before we even began to write what a new set of social principles would look like. Then we created 6 writing teams dedicated to creating a first draft. Following the first draft, we opened it up to the public. Over 4,000 United Methodists provided feedback, thousands of individual comments on the revised social principles. A second draft was written. A third draft was written. A final draft was written after the 2019 General Conference, and that's when the Board of Directors of the General Board of Church Society approved it and sent it to General Conference. It gives you a sense of where our team members have come from. Again, a very worldwide process. Our guidelines for revision of the social principles: number 1, keep them theologically grounded. Number 2, make them globally relevant. Number 3, make them succinct. Make them succinct. This is important, and I'm going to stop here. The new structure, what's currently the natural world is now called the community of all creation. Why the word community? Community provides consistency in all sections now, and you see that intersectionality. So community of all creation, it's not like the natural world is over here, the world community is over here. No, when we're talking about the community of all creation, we're talking about the natural world creation. We're talking about economics, we're talking about politics, we're talking about the nurturing community, we're talking about the social community. So there's a greater intersectionality in our revised set of social principles. We've moved from the natural world, social community, nurturing community, political community, world community, to now these sections: the community of all creation, the social community that includes the nurturing community, the economic community, and then the political community, which includes what is currently in the world community. So it's, again, a new restructuring. This gives you a sense of where public listening sessions were held by state. You see some highly represented, but pretty diverse, and also worldwide. Okay, where you see people having conversations in church basements, parlors, theological schools, United Women in Faith gatherings, global young people's gatherings. Most of the agencies of the United Methodist Church held some kind of a gathering. This gives you also the locations and the numbers. Okay. Also the diversity when it comes to theological opinion. Also the caucuses of the church participated in this. This gives you a sense of the central conferences that participated, over 400 participants in the central conferences. We believe this is a teachable document appropriate for preaching, teaching, and use in local churches, but also with decision making, work with decision makers. My work takes me to meet members of Congress every week. Tomorrow there'll be a public hearing on this human rights situation in India. Unfortunately, because I work ecumenically, I cannot hold the United Methodist social principles in my hand as I talk to members of Congress. But as a United Methodist, I will tell them where our church stands when it comes on to certain issues. And I will encourage other church traditions I'm working with to do the same. We have a gift in terms of our advocacy when it comes to the social principles. And these are some of the major changes in the community of all creation. I would call your attention to them. Destruction of ecosystems, agency of indigenous people, sustainability, environmental racism, affirming science and traditional wisdom. These are either all new or significantly amended and inclusions in the community of all creation, right? Economic community changes, social community changes, political community changes. And this is where you can read the revised social principles. Church and Society has put together a fact sheet Q&A. I encourage you to go to their website. You'll see it. It's readily available. If you have any questions, you're welcome to ask me, and I do best I can to answer them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So again, lots of information. Again, there will be more links in the chat, and I encourage you to look at those, especially as we get through our conversation today. Usually we pop a lot of those in at the end, but there's some as we go. And we encourage you to view the recording later. Everybody will get an email saying, hey, the recording is available. And here's not only the recording, but the links that you need to follow and know where you are, right? General Conference is coming fast this year, and it's been 7 years. So we are just actually rocking and rolling from a number of years back. So, and that's okay, because you know what? United Methodist used to be like, woo, and then they'd fall down in the straw. So if you find yourself feeling that spiritual uplift of energy, you're in the right place. You are a United Methodist. Okay, so the next person that I want to invite to share with us is Nancy Blade. And Nancy Blade is an elder in the serving in rural and town churches in Northern Illinois. She's been serving since 1988. She co-chairs the New Illinois Task Force focusing on eco-sustainability. Their activity has included resolutions, green summits, hosting, Earthkeeper training, coaching local churches, and more recently, net zero. And I have been very grateful myself for the work of Nancy Blade in helping navigate all the things that are General Conference. And so I'm going to turn it over to Nancy.
Well, thank you, Rushinda. Yeah, it's a big job trying to navigate this, and being the person from Northern Illinois, you know, I'm in the place that I can speak the West Path as well as some things that are going on in the Midwest. So I'm only too happy to help the committee work on that. I want to share with you what has been happening in legislation. We've put forth some things we propose, and other ones we want to support, so that we can, you know, move into the future and catch up with some outdated structure that we have. So as you know, there are two types of legislation. There are petitions to change the Book of Discipline, and there are petitions to add statements to the Book of Resolutions. And the Book of Resolutions is our official expressions of what is United Methodist. So they matter too. They matter because, you know, you can preach from that, you can take it to a Bible study class and, you know, work it through with folk and just try to understand. Our social principles are the basic structure of what's in the book of resolutions. So that's key into fleshing out some of what's in the book of resolutions. So I think both are important. But first, let me speak to what's in the book of resolutions, and I'm going to share my screen here. Right one. And these are the documents that we're looking at. So because we didn't meet in 2020, we had several resolutions sunset, which means they were supposed to be renewed in 2020. And so we need to readopt those, and they were critical ones. That's the second paragraph, and 1033 and 1035 call for care for creation and a call to justice and stewardship and justice, climate change, and the church's response. Those are important ones we've been using to back up a lot of our legislation that we proposed. And then there are many resolutions that are just going to sunset this year, and we just have to retain them. One of them, the Law of the Sea, was originally written in 1980, and that was our first document on environmental justice. So all those were very important. Another one that's coming up is the new energy policy statements that Board of Church and Society wrote, and it redefines what our energy economy should look like. And we want to get rid of fossil fuels, coal, gas, and oil, and even nuclear power and large-scale hydro projects. So if we can think in terms of alternate energy that don't include those, that's kind of the vision of where we want to be in our energy policy. An interesting one that also is new this year that is for the Book of Resolutions is use of plastics. And we all know what a problem this is. And this came from one of our German United Methodists, and we're asked to change our behavior towards single-use plastic at all levels. It's a good resolution, and I hope it just gets passed on the consent calendar. Green team formation. Green teams have been around a while, so we're looking at some legislation for the Book of Discipline, but in the Book of Resolutions, it goes a little bit further and describes what we could do with our green teams in worship, education, practice, and advocacy. I think these are very important to have in our toolkit. Another resolution echoes what our agencies and Council of Bishops has already said, is that we want to be net zero by 2050. People may think that's far reaching. People might think that's not soon enough, but we got to start somewhere and just start working on this. We do have worldwide bodies that have helped us see where we want to be by 2030, 2040, 2050. And we've got that kind of stuff to help us get in that direction. I'm going to let Kim Richmond a little bit later talk about land use, but that's also one of the resolutions, as well as some of the documents in for our Book of Discipline under the financial administration sections. Well, let me turn over to the Book of Discipline. And, I don't want to detract from anything that Neil said about this great document that was worked on, but I hope in the future that we can update it a little further. In recent years, we have discovered how gas is not the go-to bridge commodity that we have wanted it to be. It really is harmful, especially because of all the leaks in the pipeline and in the system. It's adding a lot to our to the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So we want to maybe look at changing it in the future, but I hope we can pass this social principles without amendment, and then maybe take it another year to fix the language there. So what we have, the rest of these are pretty much structure. We are looking at getting some structure into the Book of Discipline so that we don't have these arguments locally about whether we can do this or not. So the first one, J.D. Hansen put forth, and it was in the 2020 document, that we can have a creation care coordinator at the annual conference level. And that would put it in around the coordinating ministry table, however your annual conference calls it. I'm having trouble in my annual conference, even though we've been, environmentally just for a long time. I'm having trouble getting that at the table. I actually had to take another job in the annual conference so that I could sit at the table and bring forth creation care concerns. So it's been hard for us to get that coordination on the annual conference level, which really is the basic support we need for our local churches. But even in the local church, we've had some trouble with our ad councils being able to get that we need to have green teams and to legislate that, to put it in the nominations list, because it said earth advocacy. So we've got another piece of legislation in the local church section where we're just changing paragraph 2254 to include green team, so that we get it, that we need to have that at the table. And another concern of ours was that even though in many of our annual conferences, mine included, that we've been calling for energy audits and reporting, that kind of thing, it kind of keeps getting shoved off the list. And so we want to get serious about that. So these two pieces of legislation ask for our local church trustees to measure their carbon footprint, their greenhouse gases. And there are companies that help you do that, including Energy Star, which is the one that is a governmental body that helps us actually get some grants and loans. So those are good things to have in our documents. So those are the paragraphs there. So if you're a part of the local church or the local church committee, we really do want to speak to you about how you can support these. One that I wrote for annual conferences is our annual conferences haven't been screening for sustainable practices, only what was written there in 603.4. But we want to use the United Women in Faith's 13 principles for our meetings everywhere. It's a great document on energy waste and consumption. So just trying to screen our local meeting spaces is one that we need to do. And I want to get to the hard one before I turn this over to Kim. And the hard one is divestment from the book, in the divestment in the Book of Discipline, specifically 717, where it asks us to divest from socially unacceptable behaviors. And we've done this over the years for firearms, for alcohol, gambling, pornography, all those things we've been doing. And we are calling on the church to add fossil fuels. You need to know that there are 4 submissions for this document for just adding fossil fuels to there. There are over 250 people signing on a petition that we want this to happen. This is happening all over the denomination, and we really think this is the time. Now we're getting some pushback from our pensions organization, Westpath Investments, who have proposed this document that you have before you. They want to add how they relate to companies, not just companies, but sovereign securities and governments. So they're admitting that, but they continue to want to engage only and not just pull out completely. We had a chance to sit down at the table with Westpath, me and some MFSA people and a theologian and from Garrett Evangelical. And as we sat down, we pressed them on, what does this mean? And can't you possibly pull out entirely? And what I understand is their Westpath, 3 to 5% of their investments overall, the whole thing, are in the energy sector, meaning coal, oil, and gas. And they want to keep engaging those companies to hold them accountable for their actions. But the problem is we have such a quiet, small voice that it does no good. And the other thing is that that 3 to 5% of all their investments is really just supporting the oil industry. Globally, we support the oil industry with $13 billion. We have, in the US, we have for 111 years, we've been passing legislation that gives great deals and support to the oil industry. And we need to stop if we're going to reverse this process. 60% of our energy is made by fossil fuels. And what we'd like to do, though we can't get off of it entirely, what we'd like to do is to decrease that at least by half. And if we can do that, we need to invest in alternate energies. And so that's what we want WestPath to do, is to pull out entirely and invest in alternate energies. The British Methodist Church has done this, and they did this in 2017. And the great line that really helped put it across the table at their general conference was asking the question, do we have a church with a pension organization, or are we a pension organization with a church? And so what we really want to do is to get our policies for care of the earth aligned with our investments, leading theologically and not leading with fiduciary responsibilities. So that being said, we still have other things to talk about. And Kim, if you would like to talk about the proposals for land use, I will stop sharing so that you can share. And I think you've got some great things to say.
All right. Thank you so much. Okay, that is absolutely fabulous. And you can see again, there's just a lot of information. And again, Nancy has spent hours pulling all these pieces forward so that you can see them. And so that is a tremendous gift to all of us. Thank you so much. So I want to introduce Kim. So Kim Richmond is a Earthkeeper. She started in the Creation Care Ministry in her home church, Maple Springs United Methodist Church in Winston-Salem. And she is active in the Western North Carolina Conference Creation Care Ministry. We love long names in United Methodism. It helps us know who we are. She is serving currently as the coordinator for that team. She's also a climate reality trained project leader and the advocacy chairwoman for her local Audubon chapter. Oh, I didn't know that actually. The bird, oh my goodness, those are such a harbinger, aren't they? They're like the heralds of the, in the ancient biblical texts, we see them as messengers who sing the songs of angels and teach humans, right? And yet we have so diminished their numbers. So it is time to see the birds as the path to help us understand what we must do to change. So Kim, I'm going to go ahead and just turn it over to you.
Thank you, Rashenda. Hi, everyone. I'm so thankful to be here with you today, to be able to share a little bit about this church land use petition that we have submitted for consideration to General Conference. And so I'll just jump right in here and tell you what's right in front of you is basically highlights from the first page of a 2-page resolution or petition that really just sets the stage for the actions that we're going to ask for on the second page. And this, I had a good friend, Pat Watkins, who kind of commented when he read through this that he said he felt was a good blend of theology and science that kind of sets the stage and the foundation. And so basically to bring in the creation stories in our theology and then marry it with the science that we've learned about since then to tell us why we understand that the things that God has given us were designed to work together in harmony in a way that promotes and sustains all life on earth. And basically, we then acknowledge that we humans are not working together in harmony with the rest of creation, and that we're in the midst of a biodiversity and wildlife crisis that's so extreme that it's referred to as the 6th extinction, and that humans are primarily the cause for this 6th extinction event. But then we go into the good news that since humans are the primary cause for this, humans can be the solution. And so that can give us the hope of having some action. So this is the second page of the petition. It's basically where we ask for all properties, all churches, and all basically the local churches and any other holders of church lands to implement actions that will bring their land back in harmony with God's intentions and systems. And then we list a series of examples of these actions that it can be. They are not all inclusive. They are not just listed like this. They have a number of, a lot of verbiage that goes with it that explains why these are suggested, but they're not all inclusive, and certainly others can come along. So the thing is, a lot of people might say, why are we concerned about what's on the outside of the church? We need to worry about what's on the inside of the church and make changes there. And that's true, we do. Many people look at the church property, the church land outside the building, as a complement to the aesthetics of the church, and don't really view it as a separate ecosystem and a place where life can abound or where it can be sterile. And so pulled up a few figures to just show people that in America, over 40 million acres of land are covered by lawn. And specifically, that is turf grass. Now, that's not just church acreage. I couldn't find a figure just for that, for all of the faith locations, but that is all of this. But when I look at my church, and I look at churches in the area, and I look at the congregation homes, their residences and businesses, it is predominantly turf grass. And I know there are locations where this is not so, but certainly in our area, and I think it is predominant across the US. And so when we look at that turf grass as just a thing of beauty, because that's what our aesthetic has learned to kind of covet the green carpet outside of our homes and our churches, we forget that there can be a heavy carbon cost associated with maintaining the lawns. And so I've researched, put up some figures for you. I'm not going to read them all to you, but gas-powered lawnmowers, gas-powered trimmers, and leaf blowers, they all contribute to air pollution. They all contribute to our greenhouse gases, I think, to much more of an extent than I realized. And the EPA even says that 5% of total air pollution in the United States comes from just gas-powered lawnmowers alone. And I saw another statistic that said that running even the most efficient gas-powered lawnmower for 1 hour is the equivalent of driving 500 miles in a vehicle. So it's something that I didn't conceive of exactly how much was there. Running a consumer grade leaf blower versus these great big huge ones that our landscaping companies use and everything, just our version, the smaller ones, releases more hydrocarbons than a pickup truck or a sedan. So there's much more of an impact from this than I think most of us consider. California Air Resources Board said that by 2020, all of these gas-powered lawn maintenance equipment in the state could produce more ozone pollution than all the millions of cars in California combined. And I just took a trip last week and flew into and out of Los Angeles airport and got into rush hour traffic getting to our location. And I'm going to tell you, that is just amazingly horrible. And to think that lawn equipment is doing more than that is pretty amazing. Then we want the lawns to look nice and green. So we put 3 million tons of nitrogen-based fertilizers on them each year. And in the process of making that into fertilizer, 4 or 5 tons of carbon is added to air pollution for each ton of nitrogen that gets fixed. So that's another 12 to 15 tons of air pollution that we have. Then we put on too much, and the turf grass can't use it. So the soil microbes turn that excess into nitrous oxide gas, which is a greenhouse gas that's 300 times more potent in heat-saving capabilities than carbon dioxide. And additionally, then some of it runs off into our local bodies of water and causes eutrophication, which is basically the dead zones and the algae blooms that we hear much more about these days. Science has shown that turf grass lawns are ecological deserts. We tend to not think of this as an ecosystem. It is a support object for our church. It is something that adds to the beauty, but native plants can add to the beauty too. Plants, animals, insects, and other biota in a certain locale, in an ecosystem, they've evolved over lots of years to live and work in harmony with each other, and turf grass wasn't part of that evolutionary process. So if we can plant more native species, which includes grasses, trees, shrubs, they will, what do I want to say, attract and sustain more native species of wildlife, including our insects. And many people say, well, why do we want to attract insects and have them grow? Well, there is a huge decline in the number of insects, and insects actually are the base for a lot of the wildlife food chain as it starts. And I'll give you a little interesting tidbit on that in a moment. But the kind of the key number that I have seen, Doug Tallamy is an ecologist, a college professor who writes books on this, and he has suggested a 50% decrease in our turf grass will make a huge change in the biodiversity in our ecosystem of our lawns. And if we can do that, they will absorb more carbon dioxide. Turf grass doesn't have much roots. Native plants have large roots, deep roots that will sequester that carbon. They're more drought tolerant. They need little or no fertilizers and irrigation, so you can help conserve water. They cool our air. They provide beauty. Just have to change our aesthetic a little bit and see that as the beauty that it is, rather than just the green carpet. They absorb more water, and during these heavy rainfall events that we are experiencing more and more, they cost less to maintain. And that's not just in dollars and in greenhouse gas emissions, but also in the noise pollution that much of this lawn equipment gives to us. And that way they benefit not only wildlife, but humans as well. Then when we've invited all of these native species into our lawn, the wildlife, insects, you want to forgo the pesticides, which helps with soil, air, and water quality. You don't want them to come in and nibble on, plants that have been treated to kill what we call pests, which are really life. And then you don't want to forget to protect the native species, which are already present because they're already important for that ecosystem. So here was my little tidbit. While I was looking through this, it says, how many insects does it take to feed hungry baby birds? The study was done in 2020 where 61 nests were monitored at a country club, and it took 5 million insects to properly fledge the little baby birds that were in those nests. So you have built-in pest control right there when you get your insects in. Another figure from Doug Tallamy that I read in his books is you need 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars just to successfully fledge one clutch of chickadees. Here, Rashinda, see, this is my bird stuff. My bird nerd is showing, I'm afraid, everyone. So we need these things. Insects will visit non-native ornamentals, but they will not lay their eggs on them. And their eggs then can't hatch into the little caterpillars that are needed because they have evolved to need a certain species. So there are reasons for that. So how do we approach our general conference?
Actually, Kim, I'm going to have to jump in because we are at time. But that's a great screen. We'll be able to get back to that for the recording. Okay, awesome. All right, awesome. I also noticed that there was a comment in the chat saying, well, this is all well and good about creation, but of course there are many issues that we all care deeply about, and one is LGBTQ inclusion. While this particular movement cafe was more focused on the creation justice, if you have a question specifically about that, this is about this sort of partnership, understanding how connected all of these things are when we care for ourselves, our earth, and our neighbors, what that ends up looking like as sort of we're trying to get at that new way we can be unified together, loving each other, loving our earth, who we are, where we are. Right. So it's even though it's not as specific here in this particular cafe, these are our heart concerns as people of faith. So I want to bring Pat Watkins in for just a couple minutes to talk about what folks can do. What are some active next steps? And then we're going to be launching breakout rooms. So I'll explain the breakout rooms when we get there, but there's 5 different rooms with the option to choose yourself whose room you would like to join and share in that space. All right, so go ahead and Pat.
So just a couple of ideas about how you guys can move forward with this. Number one, check out all the links in the chat. I know there's a gazillion of them, but do a copy of your chat, and so you'll have those links. And then check out those links, and if there are particular things that you resonate with, then kind of hang on to those pieces of what we've been talking about. If you're going to be at General Conference, please let us know so that we can hook you up with volunteer opportunities. Mitty suggested a few things. You could also be involved in our worship service as committee observers, as a participant in a protest that's planned. You could hold a sign or a banner in front of the convention center. You can hang out at our display table and visit with people and talk to people about who we are and what we're about. If you're not going to be at General Conference, you can keep up with what's going on there through our communications network, and you can keep the United Methodist Creation Justice Movement and LINK and the General Conference itself in your prayers. You can tune into the Earth Day worship service as well, because that's going to be streamed, and there's a toolkit available for you to help you put together a watch party at your house or at your church. And finally, if you know any of the General Conference delegates from your annual conference, please be in touch with them and have a meeting with them, talk to them, make sure they understand these resolutions that are so important to us, and a way to find out the talking points to understand our support of those resolutions. Okay, those are my thoughts. Rishinda, back to you.
Awesome. Okay. Yes. So much going on. Okay. I am pressing the open all rooms button. You will notice that our wonderful presenters are all offering different rooms and spaces, and you get to choose where you go. If you need help choosing, I will help you choose. So no worries. You can put in the chat which room you want to go in. And the presenters, please choose the room with your name on it. Make sure we get everybody in the right place. And so the 5 rooms are Link with Mitty Quinn. That's room number 1. Number 2, Regional and Principles. So those big topics with Neil Christie. Divestment and Legislation with Nancy Blade. Church Land and Legislation with Kim Richmond. And Earth Keepers, which is ongoing great work with Jonathan Brake. So yes, that's awesome. So go ahead and choose your rooms. Sort into your houses, so we should say, and then I will bring us back when we got about 15 minutes there, and then we'll be back for just a final closing. Welcome back. I know how awesome those rooms are, so I'm smiling from ear to ear, in part just because I'm feeling that. I good to see everyone back. Okay, so what we're basically doing here is our last things. We have 5 minutes left, which isn't very much. We had a big, robust conversation today, and I just want to thank our wonderful presenters, and especially Mitty Quinn and Neil Christie, who have really robustly entered into this work for so many years at the intersection of probably one of the toughest conversations United Methodism has ever had, which is the inclusion of LGBTQ people, right up there with colonization, right? It's just really hard to talk about and really important that we do. And so they have many other opportunities. There'll be more cafes, webinars at General Conference. Mitty kind of gave an invitation if you're at General Conference to come and hang out with them. And as somebody who's done that in 2019 and at in St. Louis and in Portland, I can attest to the hospitality that I was honored to be part of. And boy, was I ever glad for that incredible gift during General Conference. So if there's any last things, we need to put those in the chat now. And I want to ask my presenters if there's anything that you would like to say as we kind of finalize where we are today in our cafe. Yeah, so check out your chat. There's some good things going in there. You will be able to save the chat. Oh, go ahead.
No, I just want to say thank you. Rashenda, thank you. And thank you for you. And thank you for everyone who made this possible. I want to share one word, friends. The ecumenical community is watching what the United Methodist Church does. Our siblings in the Catholic Church, the Reformed Church, other Methodist churches, Presbyterian, Lutheran, Anglican are watching what we do because the social principles impact our relationship with them. Fossil fuels has been dealt with in other church traditions. They're waiting to see what we do in terms of divestment and regionalization. Other churches have gone through this and they've come out alive. So all of the issues we've discussed today we're not doing this alone. Our siblings are watching us. They're praying for us. This is big stuff. So thank you for your taking the time to engage in it and to support it. So thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Absolutely. And I'm going to ask Nancy Blade to pray us out. Nancy.
Sure. First, I'd like you to listen to this poem. It's written by a Benedictine monk back in the 1990s, B.D. Griffiths, who's now passed. He said, Christ had to go through death in order to enter the new world, the world of communion with God. We have to go through death with him, both as individuals and societies. It is the only way. And this is the challenge that faces the world today. We are passing out of the old one, the world of Western domination. Something new is emerging. Our patriarchal culture is being challenged at every level. It is a moment of trauma, of birth, and of these great movements of change, we can discern the purposes of God and of his kingdom. Hope that gives you some hope. And then I want to give you a blessing that comes from the book, what are Earth Keepers, or not Earth Keepers. It's The Earth by Sam Huntington Poole. And I've used this to create the walk on the green at annual conference. So I hope you take that walk. So here's your blessing. May the Creator give you eyes to see the new creation springing forth. May Christ give you the ears to hear the laughter of new life. May the Spirit set free your feet and heart, dancing to the rhythm of resurrection. Amen. Amen. Go in peace.
Amen.
Oh, that's beautiful, Nancy. Well, please send those to us so we can include them in the mail out. Those absolutely beautiful blessing. All right, so this is the abrupt part where we just wave and say goodbye to each other. It never feels great to hit the off button, but that's what we do next. So thank you all so much for being here. Any blessings.